Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I sure appreciate it. My name is Donna Miller, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Purse Power. Purse Power is working to help women use their massive purchasing power to drive positive change. We believe that if women who make 80% of all purchasing decisions would choose to buy from the companies that actively promote women, and we would do that in mass, and we could create a funding stream for battered women's shelters in the process, that we could shatter glass ceilings and change lives. So that's what Purse Power is doing. That's why we're here today. We are in webinar format, we're in meeting format. We will be taping the video today. We will put it up on our website along with our 90 other episodes. You can find those at pursepower.com and click on the Let's Share the Journey link. In addition, we post our Friday speakers every Monday, and I'm so glad you're here today. So thank you so much for joining us, Lynn.
You bet.
This is going to be great. Okay, now let me go ahead and introduce the accomplished Lynn Flinn. Lynn empowers her clients to move their businesses forward with intention and passion. She exemplifies how focus, planning, and interactive learning can remove barriers to achieving maximum results. While president and managing partner of the Rowland group of staffing companies, Lynn grew the company's profitability and management team, which led to the selection and buyout of the Rowland group in 2019. Under her leadership, the Rowland group was named Tulsa's best place to work 6 years in a row. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's awesome. In 2004, she founded the Tulsa chapter of the Oklahoma Business Ethics Consortium, which reaches about 600 members statewide, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Great organization. You ought to look into it if you're not in it. She's currently the chairman of the board and provides leadership for the selection of the current executive director. She's been awarded the Oklahoma Women in Business Champion, presented by the U.S. Small Business Administration, Outstanding CPA in Business and Industry from the OSCPA, and has received many other awards. And then finally, the way I know you is for the past 15 years, Lynn has provided female executive peer advisory groups where she coaches and consults. She speaks on topics ranging from workplace culture to retaining and hiring talent and ethics. So you're a public speaker, you're a coach, and I know you facilitate these peer groups of female executives. You've got a lot of important stuff to say. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Please, we want to learn more about you. So please tell us about your journey and the professional experiences that have shaped you and how you arrived at this place in your life and career.
Well, I'll tell a couple of quick ones. I think it was influenced, you know, how you get into things and it's later that you reflect back that you figure out how it happened. So as we talked earlier, I'm a CPA and I got into public accounting and did all that track, but then I got into the staffing industry. And as I reflect back on it, I think that happened because of my dad. And my dad would come home every day and tell me how much he hated his job. And he wanted to retire with disability, which he ended up doing. And he passed away, but he was never happy. And I thought to myself, I need to help other people get happier in finding jobs. And that's, I think, largely why I loved the staffing industry, was helping people find things that were fulfilling for their job. And then fast forward, my parents got divorced when I was 12, and my mom had to go get her GED, got her biology degree, then went to medical school and asked me if I would co-sign her loan to go to medical school when she was 36 years old.
Wow.
And she had 3 kids by the time she was 19. So this showed me that if you have a dream and you want to fulfill it, you can do it. And I also thought, I want to make sure I can take care of myself no matter what. So I want to make women be empowered to do whatever they can do. And I think that's probably why I love to do my women's executive peer advisory groups, is helping women business owners and women executives be better and able to do what they do. So that's my inspiration behind it.
That's your story. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, so as a highly regarded public speaker, what advice do you have for us for leveraging speaking engagements to grow our businesses? And I know a lot of our audience does coach and runs they're independent consultants. So this is hugely valuable. And how can we best identify and seize these opportunities?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is to make sure you know what your target audience is. Figure out who do you want to reach first. And then go find those organizations that might partner up well with that. It's nice if you can have somebody, and this isn't always possible, but if you can have somebody else who can promote you, it's a little bit nicer feel to it because they're saying something great about you instead of you having to say something great about yourself. But if you can't, then it's just matching up what your skill sets are, or what the things that you can communicate to the group. And when you get the opportunities, I think it's so important that you find a topic that you're passionate about that matches up with the organization, and don't oversell yourself. Don't make it a commercial, make it not something yucky to feel like that, but make it be really you're there for the right reasons, but you can share your thoughts and ideas, and people will naturally be drawn to you, I think, if you're being authentic about why you're there.
You're bringing up something important. We had somebody come talk to a group that I was running about promoting yourself. And one of the things she talked about was awards, so Linda Hanna Award. And she was saying, you ought to partner up and put each other forward for accolades. Does that make sense?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, you could even partner with other peers doing something similar and promote each other around speaking engagements. I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, and I've actually seen people leverage that, where somebody else will, well, I've actually done that for some of my people in my business groups. Is I would nominate them for an award if I can see a place that they could win, or say somebody won the year before and you're like, you know who would be great for that award for next year? So always be thinking ahead, who could you nominate that deserves to be honored in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So for people that feel apprehensive about public speaking, what insights can you share to help them overcome their fear and be more courageous about it?
Well, first off, I have empathy because I used to be terrified to speak in public. So I'm coming from a place of true understanding. And I remember I froze up in 7th grade and trying to do a speech, and it took me years to get over it. And I went to speech class. So I believe in speech classes to help you get better, because it's really all about practice and getting confidence. And the more you do it, the better you get. And sometimes to be good at something, you have to be bad first. And believe me, I was. And I think that you have to just really want to do it. And if you set your mind at it, then you just go to places where you can be comfortable. You can do the speech class, you can do Toastmasters. Start with small groups first. And at our OK Ethics, we always have a little guiding principle, which is a 3 to 5 minute presentation. So I will go try to find people to do it. And a lot of times I get turned down because people don't like public speaking. And I say, it's only 3 minutes. And I will encourage someone I know can do it. And then I've seen people grow through that, where they're able to then start doing more and more. So for me, it's practice. It's just keep doing it no matter how hard it is, and have a topic that you love and tell a story that you're comfortable, and you'll relax. And then it's not so scary when you're relaxed about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But be ready. My mouth used to be cotton mouth. It was hard. And finally, I just was able to get over it, and I just kept doing it till now I don't get uncomfortable anymore.
Yeah, same here. So I did Toastmasters, I did Dale Carnegie, and Dale Carnegie, of course, is famous for his public speaking courses. Apparently he was terrible at it when he started, and he just kept doing it.
Yeah, and I think, just learning little tips about, keeping your eye contact and being not monotoned and telling stories and looking around. And then you'll relax more as you do it more.
Yeah. I was up for some kind of reward, and I was having to give a talk. And the other thing I did to try to keep my nerves down is I was doing math problems in my head before I got up to the podium so that I wouldn't think about it.
Oh my God.
Okay. In order to create a powerful impression when engaging various audiences, what key elements should we focus on to enhance our executive presence? And I know a lot of women want to understand executive presence and how to come across like that.
Well, I think that the executive presence thing is hard because we're not used to always being in that format with people. And I remember, this brings to mind when I was, one of my first jobs out of school, I was a staff accountant at Sampson Resources. And in that job, I had to work with executives. I was put in charge of the books for one of the companies, and I would work with the executive officer there. And then we would have to go in front of the top executives at Sampson Resources. And here I am, this little accountant that has no clue about how to present to executives. But what I figured out was they were just people first. And secondly, I just needed to have confidence that I knew what I was doing, because when it came down to it, I knew more than they did about the details of this business. So it's believing that you have something to say and you are probably better at it than they are, because they don't know how to do the books for this company. And so I would anticipate their questions and I would explain it to them. And then they were very gracious to me though, and they let me learn. And I learned a lot by listening to them. I watched how they did things. And I thought, you know, I want to be like them in that they were gracious to a new person who didn't know what they were doing at first. But then I started to anticipate what kinds of questions they would ask. And my executive presence probably got better. So I think it's confidence, number one. I faked it a lot. I pretended that I was totally confident. I don't think it showed too badly that I wasn't really, but that's one thing my mom always said, fake it till you make it. And I think that's really important, is just come in believing in yourself and do the best you can and be prepared. That'll give you more confidence if you know what you're doing. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's how you'll learn. And then you get even better at it, because I don't think people mind questions. They want to help for the most part. And I think most people are gracious. So those are my things of executive presence is I think so often people are afraid to ask questions because they think they're going to look stupid. But to me, it looks worse when you don't ask questions and you don't grow. I think people know that people that may need to grow at certain points. And so why not just admit it and just say, hey, I don't know what that means. Could you explain it to me? Or I'm not sure about that. What did you mean by that? That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been studies that have been done about the performance of teams, and teams do better when there are more women on the team. The research proves it. And I think part of it is we are willing to ask the questions, or willing to say, I don't know. Please help me understand, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Hey guys, if you have any insights on executive presence from your perspective, would you put it in the chat? I know that this is something that a lot of people want. And the one learning I had early in my career, of course, I'd come into every meeting with every executive with a PowerPoint and all my notes, and I was on it, right? But I was presenting way too much detail. And there was an executive who said, all right, to come across with executive presence, you don't do that, right? You've got an understanding of the topic. You can ask the questions, you can answer the questions, but you don't come in talking about every single detail.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that, you know, when you're, depending on what it is you're presenting on, if it's say a boardroom situation, you want to come in with it needs to be tight. It needs to be concise. Because if you look at CEOs, we don't like details. We want to get a quick overview. And sometimes I think some women do get into too much detail, and that's not the place for it. If you're the executive level, you need to be on your game, and you need to be prepared, and it needs to be concise, and you need to stay within the time allotted.
Yeah, great point. So one of the things I tell people in coaching is I say, rather than giving me the 5-paragraph answer, give me the 1-sentence answer. And then if they want more, you give them more, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so when you face different kinds of speaking challenges, do you adopt different approaches to it? Can you provide examples of your strategy, given the environment that you're in?
So if you're just make sure I'm hearing what you want to know on this.
Yeah.
Are you talking about different venues or?
Yeah, so you talked about a board meeting. That's one venue, right? You might have a public speaking engagement. You might be running a panel or in a conference, or just if you have different strategies based on the setting.
Well, I think that if you're looking at a boardroom, obviously, kind of going back to what we were saying, that's one where you need to know what your role is, what your topic is, stay on point and keeping the time, and just be prepared, and also anticipate questions, maybe practice it with somebody else that's a little bit knowledgeable about what it is you're going to talk about, and make sure that you're hitting the points and if ready for any questions that might come up, have them say, what question would this bring up to you, so you can be prepared. So that's what I would do on that one. And then as far as public speaking, I like to know my venue. I like to know my audience. What do they want to know? What are the things that they care about? And that way you can lace in stories that match into what they want to hear about. And I always, of course, you want to look around the room, you want to be engaged with the audience, all of that. As far as virtual goes, honestly, it's not my favorite venue, but it's just one of those things where you don't get as much feedback, and where I love feedback from the audience. But with virtual, same thing, just make sure you know your audience and what they want to hear about more than anything.
That is a super important point. I mean, sometimes people talk about what they want to talk about rather than what the audience wants to hear, wants to learn. That's a really good point. And Julie's suggesting that everybody practice in front of someone. Absolutely.
Yes, yes. And I practice, usually I'll go over my materials usually a couple days before, and then I'll think, no, I don't like that, and just chop things out or move things around and put notes down. I don't know. I think one thing that I really am strongly always doing is I always have a printout of my presentation with my notes, just in case something goes awry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And the other thing I do is I have it on my computer, but I also give it to the host, and they've got it on their computer if something blows up.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. And Julie's also pointing out that, if it's virtual, the good lighting piece makes a lot of sense. And you and I practice, right? We took a look at how it's going to look. You bet.
Yeah, we made sure that the cameras were working, and at first our sound wasn't working, and and I remember Donna saying, "Oh, glad we did this," because you always want to make sure that you've done what you can, and something still can go wrong, but you're still trying your best. I was doing a presentation for the CPA group in Oklahoma City, and my power went out, and I was like, this is great. And then my power never went out before that, but then I just got back on, power came back on, and came back in and said, sorry guys. And you just got to just roll with it at that point. There's nothing you can do.
Right. And it happens to everybody. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of this whole virtual thing that we are doing, is people are going, okay, technology, it works and it doesn't. Okay, so what are your go-to methods for effectively preparing for public speaking, and how do you feel really confident and well-equipped?
Well, I think just like we talked about, as far as, I think you got to know your topic well. You got to feel passionate about whatever it is you're going to talk about, and just make sure that you're hitting some good points you think that audience will enjoy and want to hear about. So if you're going to speak to a group of accountants, I'm going to try to tell stories that relate to things I think they can relate to, about funny things that happen to me during a busy season, or how a client might treat you, or something of that nature. If I'm talking about business women like today, then I want to make sure that I connect with you all, and we talk about things that business owners care about, which, when it comes to speaking, it is usually going to be about your business, and trying to make sure you tell a message about your story that makes people want to know more about you or be a part of your business. So it's really like, why do you care about it? What made you want to be in this business? So I think always thinking about your business and what matters to you, and how can I communicate that? And let's just say you want to get other women involved in your business, or you want to have other women do what you do and teach others. Then tell your story about why that matters to you, and just be authentic about it.
Okay, so how about how do you manage anxiety for yourself?
I think that, again, for me, it was an issue that I've had before, and I think that it's just taking deep breaths, before you go up there. Like even now, when I'm at the table before I'm going to go up, I usually will just kind of take a deep centering breath, and I will be thinking to myself, hey, you've got this, positive affirmations, you know what you're talking about, you've got something to say, you can be funny, you can look around the room, smile at people that you know and that are there, so that you feel confident that they're there to support you. And really remembering that the vast majority of that audience would not want to be in your place right now, and they're going to give you all the grace in the world. So they're going to be fine with you. And if you do ever mess up and miss up a word or whatever, don't worry about it. I mean, it's just like you're a normal person. Everybody messes up words. I once heard a friend, he was up there doing his presentation, and he said something completely goofy. It was like he used the wrong word, and he realized it all of a sudden, and the whole audience laughed. But instead of getting tied about it, he goes, oh yeah, that was pretty funny. You know, I mean, he just made fun of himself. So keeping your sense of humor is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that you feel so much better when you just relax and realize that you're going to be fine and you're just talking to friends. Think of it as just talking to your friends and you're just telling them things, just naturally relaxed. And then you won't be all uptight. Nobody expects you to be perfect. And like I say, most people are going to give you a lot of grace because they don't want to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And your point about going and talking to everybody in the room beforehand, I've done that and it really does help you. So you start talking before you have to get up on stage and do it, and you've connected with the audience.
Exactly. I do that a lot. I'll go walk around the room and I just try to find out who's there and what do they do. And then I feel like, and a lot of times, sometimes people are shy and they're kind of like, why is the speaker talking to me? And it makes you feel like, hey, I'm just a person like you. And you see that they're kind of tensed up a little bit about just talking. And then you feel more relaxed, like, oh, well, I want to make them feel comfortable. So it kind of puts you in a role of nurturing the audience, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
And you feel more relaxed because you're there to make the audience feel good.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. The other point you're making is get it off of you and onto them. It's about them. It's not about you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So how about insights on effective and ineffective body language when we're communicating?
Well, I think because I came from the staffing industry, the first thing that comes in my brain is eye contact, because whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're giving your people the eye contact. And I have seen speakers who just look down like this at their notes the whole time, and it's just very disconcerting. And they also use the monotone thing of there's no inflection, there's no excitement. I'm sure anybody that's ever been to any kind of CLE, CPE, and you've had speakers like that, it's just like, oh, it's just terrible. They just are just so monotone. And they're not doing anything that's telling. I like stories and examples. That's how I learn. I think most people I know learn that way. So giving some true examples of things that have happened to you or things that might inspire others is a great way to keep your audience more interested in what you have to say. And so, but the body language too, using your hands, I think is good, but you don't want to be like too expressive where it becomes distracting. But you know, you also want to, this is a body language thing that's an in-person body language, so I'm kind of mixing two things together. But when also in the staffing industry, handshakes, and this applies to all of us here, that people really do learn a lot about you by your handshake. And when I would come to greet people in the lobbies, there would be times where, and this is the thing about men and women handshaking. Sometimes men, they like want to take your hand and do this little, like, oh, you're so delicate for me to do a handshake. And it's really irritating. And then I've had men that just like want to break your hand off and they squeeze it so hard. We had this guy come in once from the FBI and he shook my associate's hand and she comes back and said, Lynn, watch out. He just about broke my hand. So I tried, but he still got my hand really hard. So he came back and I told him, please don't shake my hand because you hurt my hand. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, you need to lighten up. And I thought, I got to give this for the good of the world. I got to tell this guy. And so, and I once asked this other person, like, should we hire this guy after we interviewed? He said, no, his handshake was too weak. And I mean, people judge you on a handshake. So I think it's important that we all remember to give a good handshake that's nice. And that's a body language thing. And just like I said, too, looking down, it makes you look like you're not confident and you don't know what you're doing when you look like that. So that's another confidence thing, is always look like you know what you're doing, and that fake it till you make it again. I just think that the body language is all about how you look in confidence or not. And in speaking, that's the most important thing, is look around, engage with people. I try to pick faces in my audience that have a smile or a nod that I
Mhm.
see them, they're connecting with what I'm saying. And then I look around and I keep my eyes on those people. And afterwards, I even tell people, thank you for being great in the audience because you helped me stay connected to somebody. And I appreciated your smile and your nod throughout this. And they're always like, oh, wow, I didn't know I had that. I said, no, you do have that. And I like to compliment people when I see somebody who's encouraging like that.
That's good. That's really good. That's really good. All right. You said you were going to share some stories on this one. So what are some common workplace communication mistakes that we can make that lead to trouble?
Yeah, so I like to tell stories on myself when I do stupid things so that others can maybe not do the stupid things I did. So I remember early in my career one time that this person that worked for me came and sort of surprise attacked me on something. They were not pleasant to me. Did not do it well. But instead of me learning, now I will share my tips, but I did not do well. I basically joined their party. And I remember, this is like an Okie saying, but maybe it should fit Arkansas saying of where, because it's about pigs, never wrestle with the pig because the pig, you'll just get dirty and the pig likes it.
Mm.
Well, I got in there and wrestled with the pig in this situation because I just got as back and forth with her as she was with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I went home and thought about that and thought, is that who you want to be? And I was absolutely not. So I realized never, ever engage with somebody when you're not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
And so first off, if you're tired, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you're surprise attacked, these are bad times to communicate with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we can probably all relate to a time in our lives when we communicated during one of those phases of our life, and we probably regretted it. So I've learned to try to control myself. The minute you get defensive, you've lost. So if you can't bring your defense down, you need to stop and say, okay, what can I do to be less defensive here? I need to listen instead of get defensive. If you can do that in the moment, I've learned to do that in certain situations, and then I can continue.
Yeah.
But if I cannot, then I must pause. I call it stalling for a good reason. And I will say something like, I think I need more reflection on this. Can we talk tomorrow? And if the person still keeps coming at you, just say, well, as I said, I need some more time for reflection, so let's talk tomorrow. I find repetition to be a very good tool anytime you're under pressure, whether, like, say you have to fire somebody, you can use repetition as, well, I think we've had this conversation and there's really nothing that's going to change, unfortunately. I need to let you go. And you just repeat it over and over, because sometimes people just won't leave you until you do. But that's one of my tips is, in communication and making mistakes, that's one thing that I've learned is do not do those communications when you're not in the right place to do them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also made it a safe space for other people that worked with me. I would tell them, if you ever need to use my office just to come and vent, I'm here for you. And so I would have people that would come in and say, I need to vent. And I'd say, okay, close the door. And they would just blast whatever was bothering them right then. And I'd say, okay, do you feel better? And they're like, yes. And I said, what do you want to do about it? And then they would tell me, and I'd say, okay, I think that's a good strategy, but I want you to do me a favor. I want you to wait till tomorrow to do it. Because I knew they weren't ready yet, but they were getting there. And so I've learned helping other people, and I've been used many times by people to come to my office and just have a place to go. So if you are that person that needs to vent, don't do it to the person that you want to vent, that you're mad at. Go vent to your friends or somebody in your family and say, I got to get this off my chest before I go in there and talk to this person, and you'll be far more effective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And guys, please go ahead and put your comments or questions in the chat. But I heard something recently that I really liked. They said, you don't have to participate in every fight you're invited to.
Yes. Don't join the jerk fest. You can stay on the sideline. You do not have to become the jerk.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Absolutely. The other thing that helps me, and guys, please comment or question, is that if you interpret people's behavior in a constructive way, I don't know that I'm communicating this correctly. I was with a company. They were about ready to, a bunch of people were ready to leave because they were so frustrated with the executive. I had to go talk to the executive as an HR person. I said, look, you've got to change your management style. He started yelling at me. Okay.
Yep.
And in that moment, I was telling myself the story. He's scared. He's afraid his boss is going to find out about it, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? So my reaction to him was not at all being afraid of him or anxious. I realized what was really going on. So telling yourself a constructive story about what's happening, I think, is also useful.
Yes, if you can keep your calm in a situation like that. I also had a boss that was a yeller, and I remember him yelling at me in front of people in the bullpen, and I just kept my cool, and I said, no, actually, this is how it works. And I just repeated myself very calmly, keep your voice down when you have a yeller, do not escalate your voice. In fact, quieter makes them calm down. And then I just kept my cool, and he turned to the guy that was standing by me and said, she's right, and walked off, and he never yelled at me again. And everyone would always come to me to ask me to go talk to him because they knew they didn't want him to yell, but I also knew some key things that would cause him to yell, so I avoided those things. And when I knew when he was going to go, his lip would start to quiver right here, and he turned bright red, and I'm like, oh, he's going to blow just like the volcano. But this thing that happened in that situation ended up he got fired and I got his job. So yeah, I mean, if you just stay cool and just work through it, sometimes it all works out in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good. We're starting to get some questions here. So any further tips on hiring and firing?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I would give people insights on that is first, you got to know what you're looking for, have a good, decent job description and what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then find some good questions you feel like are going to bring out the things you want to know about in that position. Customize it to fit the position, because you don't want to ask accountants the same question you want to ask salespeople. Mm-hmm. And I love role plays. So especially when I'm hiring salespeople, because they can talk a good game, but the question is, can they actually get on the phone and show you what they can do? Mm-hmm. And you'll run people off, which is fine, because if they can't do it, then you don't want them anyways. So I like to think about ways can I test people. If I'm hiring a marketing person, I might give them a couple things I want them to do and say, send me an email to see how do they communicate in writing. You can set up ways you can actually see people in action versus they can talk and tell you things, but can they show you? So that's a thing, that little tip I've learned that a lot of people don't do.
Yeah. No,
as far as the firing part, the most important thing there, I'll just make it quick, but the most important thing there is make sure that you've done your job. Have you fairly given this person an opportunity to improve on their performance? Have you documented that? Have you had conversations? If the answer to those questions is yes, and you do not see any light at the end of this tunnel, then firing is the best option. But no one should ever be surprised when you fire them. Even if they act surprised, but they shouldn't be surprised, then that's mm-hmm. okay. But you need to make sure that you've done your part. Then secondly, when you do fire them, make it quick. Don't make them feel humiliated. You've already got to do something hard to them. And I'm very compassionate when I fire people, which mm-hmm. may sound strange, but I'm a very good firer for that reason, because I empathize, but I'm firm at the same time. And I'm quick. I can usually, if your firing is done right, you should be out of there in about 3 to 5 minutes max, because you tell the person, as we've spoken before, I need to let you know that your employment is terminated effectively today. And then they usually go say something back. And if they start getting into details, you just say, well, my decision is final, so it's time for you to go. And then if worst case, you just stand up and start walking for the door. And that's the effective way to do it. And you're very compassionate. If they ask you to say, oh yes, we will be happy to make sure your check is this, and then I'm very kind about it. But it's also, you get them out, you have to let them go. And you do not ever let somebody talk you into letting them stay. It'll be a disaster. I know every person that's ever done that has regretted it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So Janae is making the same comment about treating everybody with dignity and respect. I so agree. If you can protect their self-esteem, that's the key. I think you get people coming back and causing a lot of problems when their self-esteem is attacked. So yes, I make it about a fit. It's not a fit. It's not a fit. Go find a role that's a better fit. That's right.
And then say your talents can be offered somewhere else. I fired this one guy and he almost made me cry, which is against my rules in firing. But I gave him the reason. I told him, I said, man, I think we both worked as hard as we can and you're just not getting it. And he said, I know, Lynn, you've really done it all you can do for me. And I really appreciate you've taught me so much. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is making it so hard to hire this guy. But the good story there was he did find another job. He came back and saw me and told me, Lynn, because of all your teaching, I'm one of the top insurance people in the country now. And I was just like, I'm so proud of you. And, you know, it just wasn't the right fit. Like Donna said, it was not the right fit.
Mhm.
And it wasn't anything either one of us could fix.
Mhm. Mhm. All right. Anything else anybody wants to ask or comment on? Please put that in the chat. Let's see here. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, when you summarize like the top 3 learnings you want us to have gotten from your time with us today, could you tell me what those are?
Well, one thing I did want to mention is that I think we can do some things that limit us as women leaders, some of the phrasing we use. And I was recently reading this book, Playing Big by Tara Moore. And in there's 2 chapters that I would highlight: communicating with power and your inner critic. And I would encourage people to read that, because when we're communicating with power, we can do little things that take away our power. And the words we choose, like my business owners, I've heard them literally say things like, well, I just have a little business. And I'm like, no, that's not right. You have a very successful business. Own what you have and don't be shy about it. We use words like little bit of this, or I'm kind of this, or we limit by little words we choose. It makes an effect on how we're going to be seen. I read one of the phrases she said is, you'll say something, you'll say, does that make sense? And I thought that was kind of an innocuous comment. I used this comment myself, and I started thinking about it after reading that book. It can be taken as either a little condescending, like, does that make sense? Are you smart enough to understand what I said? Or mine was really to see, did they understand? But the question is kind of stupid, because it only gives them a yes or a no. They might have understood part of what I said, but not all of it. So she suggests that you say, what are your thoughts? And that's a far better question, because they can say, then I'll see if they understood better than just a simple yes or no. Because really, when you ask that question, what is the answer you're expecting? Yes. But it's not a very good question. So I vowed to work on that. And so the thing that I would say is pick one thing that you can work on. So read the book, Playing Big. Pick only one thing you're going to work on, because too much, if you try to do it all at once, it's too daunting. And then have an accountability partner that'll help you stay on track to see if you are really tracking with that. And then practice the things that you're trying to work on and get better at it.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So how about actions we should take? You've kind of given us the actions. Any other actions you want us to take?
I think that's the biggest things. The other thing I would say is consider what it is, the medium that you're trying to communicate in. So if what is it you're trying to do? So decide what is your medium that's better for this. Texting, for example. And I know Donna and I both have sons, and they give us feedback, which can be good or bad at times. But I texted my son one time after he sent me something, and I said, K. Well, he then criticized me quite harshly, saying that, Mom, that is very rude for you to put just K after I've taken the time to type this out, blah, blah. And so I never said K to my son again, because apparently I needed to give him, he said, at least use an emoji or something. So I learned that also he told me that I was sending paragraphs through the texting, and that was not okay. So that was an email opportunity for me. So what is good for emailing? What is good for texting? And then when my husband and I have this rule that if you go back and forth 3 times with somebody on email, just pick up the phone and call them at this point. You need to have a conversation. So pick your medium based on how is this going to communicate effectively what you're trying to communicate. And then also the book Playing Big also gives a great examples of emails when they'll give you a before email and an after email, and you'll see how much better the after is. And so you can sort of see ways you could take that and modify it and use it yourself. And I found some ways that I could improve my emails by that process. So medium and message is important.
That's a great point. Okay, I love Tiffany's question here. She said, any thoughts on males that don't look up to you or respect you, or ones that don't treat you like a boss? She's a senior leader over there.
Yeah, that is always tricky. I guess personally, I've had that only happen to me very rarely as a boss, because I think, I don't know what it is. I just feel like I carry myself in such a way as, dude, I'm your boss, you know? And I think that just that they know that you have the power and that you ask them to do things and this is what you're going to do. I just give very succinct feedback to them. If I think somebody is being disrespectful or whatever, I guess I would just say, hey, what's going on with you? I'm a little confused by your comments. What's happening with you? And try to understand where are they coming from? Like, what's happening with them that's making them act this way? But I think that, tell me, what was the second part of it that you were talking about?
She's saying the ones that don't treat you like a boss or treat you with respect. I think that's a key deal.
Yeah, I remember once this one guy that worked for me told me once that when he's going to be a boss, he's going to be way better than me because he's going to make everyone happy. And he was a young guy, and it was one of my first boss experiences. And I remember I said to him, you know what? I said, about 8 years from now, you're going to look back on what you just said to me and realize you're crazy. I said, you can never make everyone happy if you're a boss. I said, you have to do what's right. And sometimes that means not everybody's going to be happy with you at all times, but eventually they'll see that you're doing the best that you can and that you're trying to be fair to all concerned. And so I use very common sense language to people that I think are off the path of where they should be. And I try to understand what's going on with them and try to find ways I can coach with them that'll be effective. One of the things I was going to say, as a leader, the most important thing to me is to be authentic. And so if somebody sees that I'm truly authentic, I've actually sat down with people and said, hey, I want to give you feedback. And I'm not telling you this to criticize you. I'm telling you this because I truly believe it'll help you be better and be more effective in your job, and you'll grow. Now, I would say 80% of the people I work with will sit down and learn from that experience and be very thankful to me. I've had people very thankful that I sat down and told them. One time I had somebody whose grammar was just awful. She used words that were not good. And I say, this is making you look not as good as you should be. So let's work on this together. I'm going to work with you. And every time you say, me and Betty are going to the store, I'm going to say Betty and me, or Betty and I, depending on when you're the subject or you want to say it right. And so I would try to work with her on how to say words correctly. And she appreciated that. And there are 20% maybe of the people that will be, to some degree, they will learn, but maybe not to the extent you would like. And there's going to be some that are just defiant. And with the defiant people, there's really not a lot you can do for people if they don't want to learn. My business partner and I used to say, you can only train people if they're willing to be trained. Mm-hmm. If they want to do it their own way, then sometimes it's better just to let them go beat their head against a wall long enough till they come back and ask for help.
Yeah, she's bringing up a really interesting point that a lot of women have gone through. Guys, I want you to come off you put your videos back on, put your speakers back on. I want to hear from you. I want to hear if you guys have any other thoughts as well, if you don't mind.
And I don't know if I fully answered that question on the male part. I think in business that unfortunately we're always going to encounter men who are going to try to make us feel lesser or maybe demean you a bit. And I personally am I like to prove them wrong versus get into it's sort of like the wrestle with the pig example. If somebody's like that, I may not change them by my words, but I could change them by my actions. And I do think I've won some men over that didn't think I could do something by what I did. I serve on some things where I have some very strong personality men who will take over. Oh, and this is a good point. In the book, Plain Date also, there's a part where it says, if you're in the same gender groups having a conversation, you tend to interrupt each other fairly equally. But if you're in male-female groups, the men interrupt women way more and virtually women don't interrupt them. So what that says to us as women leaders is we have to be aware that's happening to us. And we either have to say, excuse me, but could I please finish my point? Or we have to interrupt them. And that's not easy for us because we want to be polite to people as a whole. But sometimes that's what you're going to have to do if you're being overtaken. I had it happen to me the other day in a meeting. These two guys, they're just forging on with something and interrupted something. And I said, excuse me, but I need to make a point about this. You mentioned that this was wrong here, but there's also, it's wrong in page 5 as well. And you wanted to redact this completely. And they were like, oh, she's right. Yeah, thank you. But I had to literally interrupt them from moving forward because they didn't even give me a chance to comment.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes as women, we do just have to be blunt and jump in there. I don't like to be harsh with people, and I try to be warm and kind and friendly to people, but there's times when I just have to speak up and get my point, or they're not going to hear me. And I think that's the same with all of us, is you got to know the type of people you're dealing with, because I do think sometimes to gain respect, you have to be strong and you cannot let somebody run you over. And that's one thing, is I'm not afraid to stand up to people and say, wait, hey, what, I need to be heard here. And I don't say that, but I just say what I want to say. And
women can help each other too. They can call it out. Hey, Betty, would you please finish your point? You know, we get
good point. Donna, that's awesome, because you're right. I've done that before too, where one time I was being introduced to somebody, and this person said something totally out of line to this woman who had just been introduced. And I said, I'm sure that you didn't mean it quite that way, or something like, wow, what did you mean by that? Because I was like, I am not going to let this guy, she did not deserve it. She was an extremely successful woman, and he just barreled over her, and it made me so mad. And I stood up for her and said, excuse me, but why would you say that to her? She's da 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 da, you know. And he was like kind of taken aback. But both of us just looked at him like, are you from another planet or what? And you're right, taking up for someone else is appropriate in certain situations. Yeah. And we can help each other. And I will give feedback to women like, hey, why didn't you ask a question? They'll come out of the meeting, ask me something. I said, why didn't you bring that up? That's a great point. And so next time, be sure and bring that up whenever we're in a meeting. If you have something to say, don't be afraid to bring that point to the people in the room. Don't wait till we leave.
Yep. Okay, any other final comments, guys? Does anybody else have any thoughts they want to share real quick?
Oh, the only thing I wanted to share was I went to a meeting yesterday with the Tulsa chapter of the Oklahoma Women in Technology. Great gals. I love listening. They're like the geekiest computer nerds that like, they know so much stuff. I'm like so impressed with them. They're like so smart. Anyway, one of them was talking about when you get into these tough situations and somebody kind of says something mean, you just say, ouch. Like if they've attacked you personally, ouch. And then everybody kind of looks and you don't really say anything more. But if you mess up and say something, then you should say, oops, and then apologize right away and just be like, oh, you know, I caught myself a minute too late kind of thing. And I thought, wow, I never heard that before. And I thought, what a wonderful quiver to have in your, an arrow to have in your quiver.
Yeah, Julie, another one I've heard is, this friend of mine taught me was, if somebody says something that's out of line, you say, with all due respect.
Oh, that's a good one.
Forth. And you basically are calling them out, but in a nice way. With all due respect, I would like to say that, la, 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 you know, it's a nice call out.
Yes, I love that one. The other thing I wanted to comment on is I was really, I run into so many people with bad grammar, you know, and I'm the way that you were able to do that, that's amazing. So if I ever run into that again, I'm going to give you a call and let you coach me through that.
Yeah, I mean, this person, I knew she wanted to do better, and she was representing us by talking to clients and people on the phone. And I just felt like there was one particular habit she had where she would always say, me and Joe are going to this event. And I'd say, so I just, it was getting on my nerves so bad that I had to say something. And I just said, hey, do you mind if I give you a little feedback on some ways you could improve your communication? And she said, yes.
And then
I
sometimes
just,
I know saying it back to them how it should be said so they can
Yeah.
hear that practice. You know?
yes,
What do you mean
yes.
you're gonna do da da da? And that can be immediate too.
And she even told me that it went even better than that, because she said that not only could I do it, that her person that sat in the same room with her could do it too. So if he, or I think it was a guy, if he heard her say that, then he would say, no, you're supposed to say Joe and I are going to this event and not me and Joe. And so we would both, she got better. And in fact, she would catch herself. She'd say me, and she'd go, no, Joe and I. And so she started getting it, and it was making her sound so much better.
Good. Very good. You guys, we're just about out of time. If people want to reach you, how can they contact you?
My email is probably the best, and it's very simple. It's lynn.flinn, Flynn with an I, @outlook.com.
All right. Very good. Guys, thank you so much. I sure appreciate it. Lynn, this was a really great topic. I think you really made us think, and I appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody listening in, and I appreciated your feedback as well.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right, guys, I'm really excited about next week's guest. I have got Chris Costello coming in. She is the EVP of Worldwide Strategic Accounts for Amazon. And she's amazing. She's come up through the ranks. She was at AT&T. That's when I knew her. And she's reached the pinnacle of success here. And she's a wonderful person who cares very much about women and supporting diversity. So I hope you guys can be here next week. Any final thoughts before we close?
I was just going to say, I speak kind of loudly because I have some hearing loss. And I've noticed that the guys really tend to like that better because they can always hear me. And we had an intern that was very soft spoken, and I think it just works out a lot better if you project and they can hear exactly what you're saying. So I just thought I'd mention that.
No, that's really good. I was glad you said that, because those sing-songy voices that are real, that was one thing you want to work on, is not your tone of voice sounding strong enough. And that's a great point, being loud enough. Sometimes we can be too soft. Well, I don't know what to think about that. But if I don't know what you're going to say about that. It's just your tone can make all the difference. So you kind of have a lucky break there that you can speak up loud.
That way. Very good.
I really do. When I first started working here, the other geologist, he actually had hearing aids because he couldn't hear. And he came into me like at the first week and he said, do you have hearing problems? And I said, well, I do, but how did you know? And he goes, well, I can just hear you so well. You project so well. And he didn't have a problem hearing me, but he always had a problem hearing the other techs and stuff. And so I started kind of noticing that, it's nice if you're in a room with a bunch of, louder guys or whatever, if you can speak up and project as loud as they are, then they can hear you better. And a lot of guys do have hearing loss.
Yeah, my husband does, and he would love you. And you're 100% right. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right. Before we go, I want to put in a plug for the Oklahoma Women in Leadership Conference. It's coming up on April 25th. And I know that one of the speakers is going to be about how you use your voice in speaking, if you guys want to come. So it's at okcwomeninleadership.com.
I'm signed up, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, very good. It's
What time of day is that going to run?
All day.
It's like 9 to 2 or something, or 9 to 3. It's a full day thing.
Okay.
All right. Okay, very good. Okay, so thank you again for coming. Sure appreciate it. Please remember, purse power, we have it. Let's use it. Okay?
Yeah, good. Thanks for all you do, Donna. You do an awesome job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye, guys.
you.
Time well spent. Thank you.
Thank you all.